This wasn't supposed to happen on live TV, but it did. The red on-air light buzzed like a warning siren, and the warm applause that had filled the studio just moments before froze in midair. What was meant to be a high-profile, polished interview, with laughter, charm, and the kind of promotional banter late-night shows trade in, took a dangerous left turn the second Kandi Burruss stepped onto the stage. Before we dive into this explosive moment on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, make sure you're subscribed to Prime Talk, smash that like button, and let us know in the comments what you think about what went down, because this is exactly the drama you don't want to miss. From the moment Kandi sat down across from Stephen, there was something electric in the air. She was radiant by all appearances, graceful, composed, and seasoned by decades in the unforgiving glare of public life. A Grammy-winning artist, powerhouse entrepreneur, and former Real Housewives of Atlanta star, Kandi seemed poised to talk about her upcoming projects. But underneath that poised exterior was an emotional cyclone that had been building for months, one that the world had watched unfold publicly. Her highly scrutinized and deeply personal divorce from husband Todd Tucker after 11 years of marriage. Colbert began with the expected pleasantries, a nod to her storied career, jokes about her star power, and a reference to her influence across music, television, and Broadway. The audience responded with warm applause. Drinks clinked in the studio bar areas, and everything felt normal. But there was a tension simmering beneath the surface, like that moment just before a storm breaks. "Now, Kandi," Colbert said with that signature half-smile that teases rather than discusses. "You've been juggling a lot lately. Music, television, Broadway, and life. And life's had some interesting chapters, right?" A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. A few eyebrows lifted. Kandi's smile remained steady, but her eyes flickered with something deeper, something heavier. "Interesting isn't the word most people would use," she replied quietly, and the room leaned in. There was a beat of silence before she continued, her voice calm but layered with emotion. Colbert nodded, sensing the pivot point of the conversation. "Let's talk about that then. Your life has been very much in the spotlight. People are curious, some might say pry, about your recent split with your husband, Todd Tucker. That had to take a toll." The applause died down instantly. Some in the audience exchanged uneasy glances. This was prime time. This was supposed to be fun. But this was also real life, and real life, as Kandi knew too well, didn't always fit neatly into a soundbite. "I want to be clear," Kandi began, her voice measured, "because what gets said online, then spun into headlines, doesn't always match what's happening behind closed doors." The audience was quiet now, suspended. Colbert leaned forward, sensing the moment but perhaps not fully prepared for the emotional depth of what was to come. "You and Todd were married for over a decade," Colbert said gently. 11 years. 2 beautiful children. That's not a small chapter of life." "No," Kandi replied, her gaze unwavering. "It's not. And I think a lot of people saw what looked like a fairy tale, what they wanted to see. But behind all that, it's always been complicated." A hush spread across the audience, the kind that happens when you know you're witnessing someone drop the facade in real time. She didn't hold back. The divorce wasn't just another celebrity breakup story. It had been brewing for a while. She had filed in November, ending an 11-year marriage that began on a reality TV set and unfolded across cameras and tabloids alike. The split was described by Kandi as a deeply personal decision, one made after prayer and reflection, with a focus on her peace, her children, and co-parenting with love. Colbert nodded slowly, letting her narrative take shape. But then, perhaps misjudging the tone, he veered into a question about rumors, speculation, and the public's insatiable curiosity about the supposed reasons behind the divorce. That was the spark. Kandi's jaw hardened. Her voice, which had until then been calm, took on a sharper edge. "You know what's funny?" she said, leaning back slightly. "It's that everyone thinks they know what happened between me and Todd. They think they have access to every breakup text, every argument, every regret. Meanwhile, they don't even know half of what we lived through." The crowd murmured, the tension now unmistakable. Colbert, ever the professional, attempted a light laugh, a gesture to soften the moment, but it landed awkwardly, like clapping after a serious eulogy. "I'm not trying to trap you," he said, but the words didn't land before Kandi continued, her voice rising, not in anger, but in fierce conviction. "Look," she said, eyes locking with his, "being in the public eye doesn't mean your marriage, or your pain, belongs to everyone else. I've seen the headlines about custody battles, contested prenups, and speculation about what went wrong. I know the internet thinks seeing a picture of me smiling online means I'm fine. That's not how life works. The audience leaned in. Some faces were sympathetic, others looked stunned, unsure of what they had signed up to witness. This wasn't the glossy, edited version of celebrity life they were used to seeing on late-night TV. Kandi paused, breathing slowly, eyes glistening ever so slightly. I've been navigating this divorce while trying to be a mother, a performer, a businesswoman, and a human being with feelings. When I talk about protecting my peace, that's not a catchphrase. That's survival. There was a long pause. Colbert clasped his hands, the usual bravado absent for the first time. And I think that's why people connect with you, he said quietly. Because you're real. That statement seemed to unlock something deeper within her. She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing just a bit. I am real, she said. And that's exactly why I'm here, not to dissect every rumor, but to say that life doesn't stop just because cameras are rolling. Pain doesn't wear makeup. The audience sat in silence, captivated by the vulnerability and raw honesty filling the studio. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. This was a confession, a reckoning, a moment stripped of script. And as the cameras rolled, something unforgettable was broadcast live, a woman refusing to let her narrative be twisted, edited, or defined by anyone other than herself. This wasn't supposed to happen on live TV, but it did. And it changed everything. The studio was buzzing, but not with the usual excitement of celebrity banter. There was electricity in the air, a tension so thick you could almost reach out and feel it. Kandi Burruss sat with her spine straight, eyes locked on Stephen Colbert, while the audience shifted in their seats, unsure whether to cheer, gasp, or simply hold their collective breath. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every flicker of emotion, every subtle twitch in her hands, every bead of sweat glistening on Colbert's forehead under the studio lights. This was no longer a simple interview. It was a collision of personal truth and public spectacle. Colbert cleared his throat, a small gesture of control, but it was clear the script had long been abandoned. Kandi, he began, attempting gentle professionalism. I understand this has been an incredibly difficult time for you. With everything out there, the divorce, the social media speculation, the public scrutiny, it seems like the world is watching your every move. How do you handle that pressure? Kandi's eyes narrowed slightly, a quiet fire igniting. Handle it, she echoed. Stephen, you think this is pressure? Try living it. Every day, people pretending to be your friends or fans, feeding off your pain for clicks, for headlines, for ratings. That's pressure. Divorce is messy. Divorce in the public eye is warfare. The audience murmured, sensing the rising intensity. Colbert, momentarily caught off guard, raised an eyebrow. Warfare? That's a strong word, Kandi. It is strong, she said, unwavering. Because what I'm dealing with isn't just paperwork. It's judgment. Every social media post, every smile, every public appearance, dissected, weaponized. And I won't apologize for protecting my children, my mental health, or my peace. The audience reacted, half in applause, half in stunned silence. Colbert tried to lighten the moment. I promise, we're not here to exploit. We're here to talk about your life, your music, your story. That's the problem, Kandi shot back. Stories are never neutral. They are framed, edited, and consumed by people who think they have a say in what my life means. And I'm done letting other people define me. Colbert pressed, careful now. But some critics say reality TV, the platform that brought you fame, thrives on drama. Some say by being a public figure, you invited some scrutiny. How do you respond to that? Kandi leaned back, folding her arms. Invited it. Stephen, fame does not equal consent. Just because people put you in a glass box doesn't mean you owe them every detail of your private life. I've worked for decades to build my career, my music, my businesses. When my personal life becomes a spectacle for clicks, that's exploitation. Colbert nodded slowly, recognizing the intensity of the moment. You've been through a lot publicly. Divorce, social scrutiny. Does it ever get easier? Kandi shook her head. No, not really. But you learn to armor yourself, to speak your truth, and not let the noise dictate your reality. That's what this is about. The audience sat in captivated silence. Social media notifications backstage were already lighting up. Hashtags like #Kandi Burruss, #Stephen Colbert, and #RealTalk were trending within minutes. And for the viewers at home who might be curious, Colbert said cautiously, can you share how it reached this point without going into salacious details? Kandi exhaled, her eyes reflecting exhaustion, defiance, and determination. It's about growing apart. Todd and I loved each other, and we still do, in our own way. But sometimes, love isn't enough to sustain a partnership when values, goals, and life paths diverge. You have to choose peace over pretense, growth over comfort, and reality over illusion. There was a brief, reflective pause. That's incredibly mature, Colbert said softly. And difficult. Kandi smiled faintly, a hint of bittersweet acknowledgement. Difficult is an understatement. But truth is liberating, even when it's messy, painful, and public. The cameras lingered on her face, the resilience, the raw honesty, the undeniable charisma. The audience, caught in this intimate yet explosive moment, erupted into applause, some standing, some wiping tears. This wasn't just an interview. This was a celebrity reclaiming her narrative in real time. Through it all, Kandi remained composed, a portrait of strength. The stage was set for what would become one of the most talked-about interviews of the year. Kandi Burruss, in all her poise, power, and vulnerability, had already made it clear she was not just a guest. She was the story. The tension in the studio had shifted from palpable to almost unbearable. The polite decorum of late-night talk had dissolved, leaving raw truth and emotion to fill every corner of the room. Kandi Burruss sat with her back straight, her eyes sharp, unflinching, while Stephen Colbert, seasoned and confident as he was, seemed momentarily navigating unfamiliar territory. The audience had gone silent, watching the exchange with bated breath, sensing that what was unfolding was not scripted, not staged, but something far more dangerous, the real collision of a celebrity's private pain with public scrutiny. Colbert cleared his throat, the half-smile that usually hinted at charm and mischief nowhere to be seen. "Kandi," he said carefully, leaning forward, "I know this divorce has been incredibly public, and there are a lot of rumors. How do you deal with the criticism that comes from people speculating about every part of your life?" Kandi tilted her head slightly, a calm yet ferocious presence that made the room tense. "Criticism," she repeated, voice low, deliberate. "Stephen, what people call criticism is often just judgment masked as opinion. I've seen headlines implying things about Todd, about our marriage, about our family, that are completely false. And it's exhausting to live under a microscope where every action, every smile, every word gets twisted." The audience murmured in agreement, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Colbert nodded, but the usual banter in his tone had faded. "I understand," he said softly. "But isn't there a line between public curiosity and invasion? How do you navigate that?" Kandi leaned back, crossing her arms, and for a moment, her face softened, a brief glimpse of vulnerability before the intensity returned. "I navigate it by choosing what I allow to affect me. But let's be clear, this isn't about fame. Fame doesn't hurt. What hurts is people believing they have a right to rewrite your story. People think that just because you smile at the camera, your marriage is fine. They think that because you post a family photo, everything's perfect. And that is far from the truth." A ripple of gasps and murmurs moved through the audience. Some nodded, some whispered, clearly caught off guard by the ferocity and honesty of her words. Colbert, sensing both the weight and the viral potential of the moment, tried to steer carefully. "But people do see glimpses," he said. "They see moments, and naturally, they form opinions. It's the nature of being in the public eye, right?" Kandi's eyes locked on his. "And that's the problem," she said sharply. "They see glimpses and assume they have the whole picture. They see a smile, and they think they understand a marriage. They see a post, and they think they understand a divorce. What I'm saying is, my life, my pain, my marriage, it isn't their property. And I've spent too long watching people profit off my struggles. Enough is enough." The audience's reaction grew louder. Applause punctuated her words, some with admiration, some with disbelief. The energy in the studio was electric. Colbert's eyes flicked to the monitors showing social media reactions, hashtags trending, viewers tweeting, clips already circulating online. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was a viral moment in progress. "I hear you," Colbert said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "But what about the argument that reality TV thrives on drama? That perhaps by putting your life on screen, you opened the door for speculation?" Kandi leaned forward, her voice rising but measured, commanding attention. "Let me tell you something. Being on reality TV is a choice. And yes, it exposes you. But it does not give anyone the right to claim your pain, your marriage, or your divorce as entertainment. There's a difference between sharing your story and being exploited. And I will not sit quietly while people confuse the two. The audience sat in stunned silence, some nodding, some mouths agape. This was not the playful, light-hearted tone of a late-night talk show. This was confrontation. Real, unfiltered, unapologetic confrontation. Colbert leaned in, his tone softening. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this, Kandi. But the scrutiny doesn't stop. Divorce, custody arrangements, the headlines, they are relentless. Does it ever get overwhelming? Kandi's hands tightened in her lap, her jaw firm. Every day, she admitted. It's overwhelming. I have 2 beautiful children, a career, a family to protect. And amidst all that, the world wants to comment, speculate, and judge. They want to package my pain into sound bites, memes, and headlines. And I refuse to let them. That's why I'm here tonight, not to give them the spectacle they want, but to reclaim my narrative. The applause was instantaneous, the energy in the studio shifting from shock to admiration. Kandi's intensity didn't waver. People have tried to define me for years, on TV, online, in tabloids. They've tried to tell my story better than I can. But no one lives in my shoes. No one knows the nights I've cried, the moments I've prayed, the decisions I've made for my children, for my sanity, for my peace. And I'm done being quiet about it. Colbert, sensing both the gravity and the viral gold mine in front of him, tried a measured pivot. So what's next for you? Professionally, personally, emotionally. Kandi exhaled slowly, a pause that made the audience lean forward. Next. Next is me taking care of myself, my children, and my truth. Next is continuing my music, my businesses, my life, without the interference of public judgment. Next is showing people that strength doesn't mean silence. It means speaking up when it matters. And right now, this matters. The applause erupted again, louder, some standing, some shouting encouragement. Social media screens backstage lit up with comments. Kandi is speaking her truth. Stephen Colbert has met his match. This is iconic. Colbert took a breath, the half-smile returning briefly, tinged with respect. You're commanding this moment, Kandi. Few people could do that on live television. She leaned back slightly, the fire in her eyes still blazing. Few people would, she said. And maybe that's the point. You can be in the public eye, you can be scrutinized, you can be judged, but that doesn't mean you lose yourself. I'm reclaiming my narrative. Tonight, this is my story. The cameras lingered, capturing her every nuance. The resilience, the defiance, the unmistakable aura of someone who had endured judgment, heartbreak, and public scrutiny, yet refused to be diminished. The audience was on its feet, some cheering, some silent, all transfixed. As the segment came to a close, the energy didn't dissipate. The tension, the honesty, the vulnerability, it all lingered in the air, palpable and unforgettable. This wasn't just an interview. It was a statement, a declaration, a moment that would be dissected online, replayed in clips, and remembered for its rawness and authenticity. Kandi Burruss had shown the world, live, that she was not just a celebrity. She was a force. And anyone watching knew one thing with certainty. This was far from over. The studio lights seemed sharper now, harsher, reflecting the heat of the moment that had just unfolded. Kandi Burruss sat back, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths, eyes still blazing with the fire that had taken over the interview. Stephen Colbert, ever the consummate host, leaned forward in his chair, momentarily stripped of his usual charm, caught in the gravity of what had just occurred. The audience remained frozen, some in stunned silence, some whispering to each other, some clapping slowly, as if the applause could not fully capture what they had witnessed. The energy in the room was electric, almost tangible, a mix of awe, shock, and respect. For the first time in years, a celebrity had commandeered a late-night stage in a way that was both deeply personal and entirely uncontainable. Kandi's words about her divorce, about the relentless public scrutiny, about the way her story had been twisted and weaponized, had landed like thunder. Every eye in the studio followed her, every ear straining to catch the nuance, the anger, the truth, and the vulnerability she had poured into each sentence. This was more than a confession. It was a confrontation with the culture that profits from pain. Colbert broke the silence, his voice soft but steady. Kandi, I think a lot of people watching tonight are realizing something important. That what's been portrayed in the media may not reflect your reality at all. Kandi's gaze sharpened, unwavering. Exactly, she said. It's never been about what people see on camera. It's about living your life with integrity, protecting your children, protecting your family, and refusing to let the world dictate the narrative of your marriage, your divorce, or your personal growth. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Todd and I shared 11 years of our lives together. That's not a hashtag. That's not a story to be sliced and diced. That's a life, and it deserves respect. The audience responded with a wave of applause, some standing, some murmuring in agreement. The energy was raw, almost chaotic, and the cameras captured it all. The murmurs, the subtle gasps, the faces of people processing the unprecedented honesty they were witnessing on live television. Social media, of course, was already exploding. Clips of Kandi's statements began circulating immediately. Hashtags like #Kandi Burruss, #Stephen Colbert, and #Real Talk trended within minutes. People were sharing the moment as if it were breaking news, and many were praising her courage. Colbert, taking a deep breath, leaned forward. It's clear this is not just about the public knowing your story, but about reclaiming control. What do you hope people take away from tonight? Kandi's lips pressed together before she spoke, measured and deliberate. I want them to understand that fame does not mean surrender. That pain does not have to be entertainment. That divorce, heartbreak, and struggle do not make you weaker. They can make you stronger if you protect yourself and your truth. And I want people to remember that real strength is often quiet, internal, and unwavering, even when the world tries to misrepresent it. A hush fell over the room. Even the studio crew, who had seen hundreds of interviews, seemed captivated, their own anticipation reflected in their wide eyes. Colbert nodded, acknowledging the magnitude of what had just happened. You've set a standard tonight, he said. Not just for how interviews can be conducted, but for how truth can be shared in the public eye. Kandi exhaled, a mix of relief and determination. I hope so, she said. Because this isn't just my story. This is a story for anyone who's been misrepresented, judged, or exploited. It's a reminder that you can always reclaim your narrative, live, unfiltered, unapologetic. The audience erupted again, applause filling every corner of the studio. The camera panned over faces, some reflecting admiration, some shock, some quiet reflection. The energy was undeniable. This was the kind of moment that would be replayed countless times on news segments, shared across platforms, dissected in blogs and podcasts. And it wasn't just about entertainment anymore. It was cultural commentary, wrapped in the framework of a celebrity interview. Backstage, producers were already discussing the viral impact. Clips of Kandi's words were being posted, screenshots circulating, and comments flooding in. Fans expressed support, calling her bravery inspiring and empowering. Critics, meanwhile, debated the boldness of confronting Colbert so directly. And Kandi herself, calm, poised, in control, sat in her chair, fully aware that she had shifted the narrative, not only of her divorce but of her public persona. Colbert, maintaining composure, gave her a nod of respect. You've made a lot of people think tonight, he said. And that's not something every guest manages to do on live television. Kandi's lips curved into a small, confident smile. Good, she replied. Because I don't want people to think. I want them to feel. To understand that behind the glitz and glamour, there's a human being making difficult choices, protecting her family, and refusing to let anyone else dictate her life. That's the story I wanted to tell tonight. As the segment drew to a close, the applause continued, and the audience slowly rose to their feet. The cameras lingered on Kandi's face one last time, proud, resilient, and unbowed. Social media buzzed relentlessly, with clips already going viral, reactions pouring in from celebrities, fans, and journalists alike. Every moment of her candor had left an indelible mark on the public consciousness. And in the aftermath, the headlines began to form almost instantly. Kandi Burruss confronts Colbert on divorce drama. Grammy winner reclaims her narrative live on air. Late night sparks cultural conversation about fame and privacy. News networks dissected her statements. Podcasts debated her boldness, and fans celebrated her courage. This was more than a television segment. It was a statement, a movement, a viral cultural moment that resonated far beyond the studio walls. Kandi herself stepped away from the set later, her posture still strong, her head held high. She knew the storm that would follow, the media commentary, the online debates, the inevitable backlash from critics. But she also knew she had done exactly what she intended. She had reclaimed her story, given voice to her truth, and reminded the world that public figures are human, with lives, struggles, and emotions that do not belong to anyone else. And now, the story was yours to witness. The drama, the confrontation, the honesty, all captured in real time. What do you think about Kandi Burruss' explosive truth on live television? Did she go too far, or was this the bravest move in late-night history? Comment your opinion below. Let us know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to Prime Talk for more stories that break the internet, challenge the narrative, and give you the real story behind the headlines. Because this isn't just television. This is life. This is truth. And this is only the beginning of what Kandi Burruss has to say.